live. Hey, everybody. How are you? We're about to go and do a Friday night special live. Give me a second to send out through all the socials. And let me make sure that I see. I hate when this double thing happens. That's muted. Oh, stop. There's always technical difficulties. In fact, we even had a laptop on fire. So let me get it here. And we'll set this up. And a little bit of setup. Now, normally we don't even post out that we're going live, but this is a special conversation. And I think we're all good to go. And cool. Let's set it off. Okay. Hey, everybody. A little background. I'm just going to set up this really, really quick. About a week ago, 2 weeks ago, we were on a show and they didn't give us a lot of time. So we weren't really able to go into any of the conversations that we were leading up to. It just never happened. And so I said, well, you know what? Let's just do it on Invisible People where we can just be ourselves and, talk freely. So here's tonight's guests, and we have Mark and Peggy and Dr. Cashel and okay, and let me first, y'all know who I am, so let them all introduce themselves. Women first. Peggy, you want to go first?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Peggy Bailey. I am located currently near Washington, D.C., and work for the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, where we work to protect the safety net program. So we work on Medicaid, we work on TANF, food stamps, and I lead our work on affordable housing and rental assistance.
Should I go?
Yeah, please.
So I'm Margot Couchel, and I'm a physician and a researcher at UCSF. I practice medicine at San Francisco General Hospital, and I lead the what we call the UCSF Center for Vulnerable Populations and the UCSF Benioff Homelessness and Housing Initiative, where we are doing research and policy work to prevent and end homelessness.
Okay, Mark, you're up.
Hello. So my name is Mark Jones. I use they, them, theirs pronouns, and I lead an organization now, which is funny to me because I didn't lead an organization for a long time, and it happened really fast, and I still don't know what I'm doing. But but I'm the executive director at the National Innovation Service, which is an organization dedicated to transforming public systems to better serve historically marginalized communities through moving power out of oppressive systems and into the hands of those who need it.
I can already tell this is going to be fun. So in the chat room, we have Derek. I don't know if Addie has made it yet. Derek is homeless and Addie is currently homeless. They will be moderating the chat room, making sure that y'all behave and then feeding us questions. So please be kind to the moderators. They are awesome. I am going to start this off kind of how the news network did. They showed a photo that really a lot of people are outraged. I believe rightly so. And we're just going to start with this and then move on. But when they showed that photo, I wanted to show a couple other photos to go along with it that was happening at the same time to give it context of what's really going on. So many of you may have seen This is Vegas. This is what was happening at the beginning of the coronavirus. And they were just putting people in squares on a parking lot. And I know everybody was outraged, right? So this is all this is we've always treated homeless people that way. We've always, they're less than, and anybody want to take it from there?
Can I go?
Please.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, that's the thing that like drives me. Like, so I lost my cool, which I'm prone to doing, but I lost my cool on a call the other day when someone asked me, what do you hope recovery looks like? And I just lost it because I was like, I'm sorry, recover to what? Like, recovery implies that we should return to something. And the stuff we do is so fundamentally jacked, and it always has been, that the idea of recovery, the theoretical framework of recovery, is offensive to me. Because what we need to be thinking about is transformation. We need to be thinking about how will we never let this happen again? How will we finally have some accountability in our conversations, in our frameworks, in the way that we live, so that we are actually owning how terrible we have let this country become, how horribly we treat people, and not lying about it, right? Like, I think that, I mean, Mark, you and I have talked about this, that like, I think one of the things that, while we differ on many things, one of the things that we fundamentally agree on is like, you cannot say that you run a system that helps people and everyone who you come in contact with hates what you do. It just doesn't make sense.
Oh my gosh.
So, like, we have to start fundamentally saying, like, look, if the people who are homeless say all of this is bad, then it just is all bad. Like, there actually isn't another conversation to have. And so, that's.
No. We're starting off kind of calm, and we're gonna build up. This is gonna be awesome. Anybody else want to tag on to what Mark said? Go for it. No, I'm asking you to.
Peggy, do you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, I think I couldn't agree with what Mark said more, because so now we have all these billions of dollars that are going out into the world, and if they're just going to pay for the same things that they always pay for, then it's going to be an enormous waste of money. That's what drives me every single day, is trying to figure out how can we make sure that we don't just dump money into the same old things, because if we do, we're going to get the same old results. And so that's what I think is so important, is that if we have to recognize the failures that we have had, because if we don't speak them, then we're just going to keep making the same mistakes, and people are going to die. Yeah. And that is just, I don't understand how that we don't just say that every single time we talk. Yeah. Because it's not, people act like this is a game, and it's not a game.
Oh my gosh.
It feels like something about COVID, I mean, and obviously the horror of it and the rapidity of it, though, has woken all these people up. And in my mind, this is just a fast moving of the same disaster that we've had all these years, right? It's sort of, people have been dying because of homelessness. People have been dying because of racism. And it feels like we're always looking for the quick fix and not getting at the rot at the core of what's really causing it all. And so COVID maybe has, when I saw that picture in Las Vegas, Mark Horvath, I think I had sort of the same response you did, is it's horrible, but we've been seeing those pictures, right. Like, it's the same old picture, it's just getting more attention.
Right. Mark, you said something that all the time you guys, you have nuggets. I wish I could type better, or I hadn't done drugs for 30 years so I could remember stuff. But you said, if everybody hates you, I'm paraphrasing, why do you keep doing the same stuff, And then Peggy, oh my gosh, we in the homeless sector, one of the things that just drives me crazy, and I'm sure it's business and everything too. We're humans. A lot of the stuff that is a fault of the nonprofit sector is because we're humans and we're complicated, and So, but we don't look at the failures. We don't even talk about them, and so then I believe we're destined to repeat them. Me, myself, and you've probably seen me rant about this a bunch of times, is that, you know, we're not really good at forecasting. We are very reactive and probably not very reactive to what's currently going on. It's like, oh gosh, that happened a year ago. Oh, we have elderly homelessness is growing, and in 3 or 4 years, we're going to start doing something about it. So how do we change? How do we change? I mean, we can have a gazillion webinars and Zoom meetings and YouTube things, but how do we get it to change,
I think that one of the most important things is to realize that people are people, right? The problem, part of the reason that we see what happens is the silos. We decide, like Margot said, we try to find the one model that's going to work, that's going to solve our problem, without realizing that people are people. We need all the things. All the things have to come to the table and be interchangeable, so that you're actually meeting people. When all these things that we hear, these person-centered care and meeting people where they're at, are we really doing those things? And if we say we're not, then what does it really look like? Overlaying all of this is the paternalism that comes in, that we enter into this work with, and trying to deconstruct that and flipping it and really saying, how do we make these connections happen so that regardless of what someone needs, we give it to them, and we don't ask if they deserve it or not. We just help people, understanding that that's where the people need this foundation of support.
Yeah. You'll hear me. Go, Mark, go.
Well, I just like what Peggy, I mean, like, so my favorite thing about Peggy is, like, when we vibe, we are vibe. It's wild to me that in 2020, when Spotify, right, can predict, like, down to like a fraction of a harmonic chord what kind of music I will like, right, that we are unable to provide tailored services to the people who need them most. True, and hear me when I say this, right? Like, we have created a country where if you are middle class and white, we have systematically engineered discomfort away from you. We have built system after system that no longer requires you even to digest news items you don't agree with or enjoy, right? We have created such perfectly curated bubbles of comfort around folks who, like, frankly, right, could use a little bit of a jarring now and then. And meanwhile, with people who actually need stuff, with the most vulnerable people in the country, we have continued to say, like, here's your, one size fits all, go eat whatever, right?
Yeah.
And it's fundamentally unethical, and it is deeply, and I feel obligated to say this, it's deeply racialized, right?
Yeah.
The fact of the matter that the vast majority of people experiencing homelessness in this country are Black and brown. The fact of the matter that, and that's before we even get to the other things, right? Like, so yes, Black and brown, but then also the fact that, like, a lot of folks are living with chronic disabilities. We do not like disabled people in this country. We have made it very difficult for disability justice advocates to do any of the work that they want to do, right? All of this is intimately connected, and these systems of oppression have hit a fulcrum point, right, inside homelessness that is so visible that, again, it comes back to that image, right, of just like, it's always been like this. We have never actually had any intention to fix it, and now more than ever, we have all these tools, all of these machines, all of these capacities. It at this point has hit a level of just frank lack of ethics and moral character or basic compassion, right? That, like, I get tired. I get very tired.
It seems like we're always looking for the quick solution too. Like, I can't tell you how, as like the white lady in the room, I'm always saying, like, we can't actually fix this until we deal with like the deep underbelly of a racist society, right? This is not, and what the response I get is, well, that's going to be really hard. Isn't there something we can do now? You know?
Right. And Mark, you said something, all of you guys, you say so much that is just so important. And I come out of marketing, and I go to homeless conferences and I go to marketing conferences. And homeless conferences are talking about data, which is important. And I go to marketing conferences and they're talking about data, which is important. But one is really customer centric. And as you said, like, you know, with Spotify or you name any tech, they know everything about you. They know how to serve you so you spend more money, which could easily be transitioned over to how to serve you to help you get out of homelessness or whatever crisis you're in and save our money, taxpayer money. And then you go to the homeless sector and they're celebrating new data points. I was on a COC and they were all clapping because they had a new data point that 50% of the people housed were now, they left housing in 6 months. And they were celebrating that data point. And I said, do you know why? Oh, we don't collect that. If you don't know why they're leaving housing, how you can't fix it. So,
and do you know if they come back, right? Like, so it's like I've said this for years, right? That like we know apocryphally from talking to people. I'm an anthropologist, so like I would consider it to be apocryphal, not apocryphal. Like that is data. You should talk to people. That's a thing. But like we've known for years in talking to people that like people come back to the homelessness system, right? Like it's recurring, but oftentimes the way that the databases are set up, we don't see that in the data. And so we celebrate exits that are not exits, right? Because they're not, like, we have not actually created what we call a stable exit, right? Where it's like longitudinally, if I check in on you in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, you're gonna be good, right? Like, we are like, oh, cool, you've been gone for 6 months, yay, us. Like, and it's like, I don't trust that, right? And frankly, right, again, in other systems of care, we don't trust that. If my primary care physician was like, cool, so, you know, like, you're good, right? Like, I'll just check in with you, like, in what, like, never again? Because, like, we saw each other for 6 months.
Yeah.
And you seem all right now, so we never need to talk again, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But somehow in this system of care, again, because the compassion isn't actually there, as soon as we can get you out and claim that we're done, that's actually what we want to have happen, or at least rather that's how the system is designed. And I think some of us are saying that is incorrect.
I have been to over 300 cities. In fact, I have stopped counting 300 cities about 2 or 3 years ago, so it might be over that. The one constant in homelessness from everywhere I go is the same amount of times a homeless person has asked for help and been turned away. That is the one constant. So how do we fix that? I mean, how do we fix some of this stuff? That's a tough one. I know.
I mean, a lot of it is resources, right? I mean, we keep scratching at the surface and sort of prioritizing people and reprioritizing people. But what we're really doing is rationing extremely short, tight resources in a system. And I'm talking about, I actually do not think we can fix homelessness within the homeless system. I think it's you know, and we've got to fix the housing system. We've got to fix all the economic justice system. You know, there's so much else we have to fix. And so I do think that there's been this huge burden in some ways placed on an underfunded homeless system to fix what is a profound failure.
Oh, yeah. Peggy, got anything you'd like to add?
No, I couldn't agree with Margot more, right? Like that one, we fix it by not letting people, become homeless in the first place, and that would be like helping people pay their rent. The other thing is the whole turning away part. I mean, that's the part, Mark, of your question that makes me cringe every time. And what I'm glad that it makes me cringe. I've been working in this work for almost 20 years now, and I'm glad that I still get angry when I hear that people are turned away, because what that means is someone judged them. Someone presented to a homeless services provider, and they judged that they did not care enough about them to give them service. And I think that's it's important for what got me started in this work was looking at the barriers, and thinking about them as bricks. Like, what are all the bricks that we're setting between the services side and the person that needs us? And why can't we take those bricks away? What is it that's making us not take those bricks away? And that's so I don't think I actually, the turning people away part, I don't think is that hard. I think it's a choice. It's a choice that we make to create a system where people can be re-traumatized over and over again and made to feel like they're failing.
Yeah. And I think, to build on, so I've been saying this lately. I think you've all heard me say it. I've stopped talking about ending homelessness because I don't think that makes sense, right? And I've stopped talking.
Wait. Okay.
Well, because the math doesn't work, Mark. The math just doesn't work. And when we say end homelessness, to Margaret's point, we wind up talking about this sliver of an infinitesimal rounding error in the federal budget, in the state budget, in the local budget, right? Yeah. And we're not having the right conversation. And that, to me, that conversation is a conversation about housing justice. It's a conversation about what would it mean to live in a nation that rejected the precarity of the people who lived here? Right. What would it mean to live in a nation that was oriented fundamentally towards thriving, that had at its core an understanding of its fundamental responsibility, right, to care when people suffer? And we don't live in that country, right? We just don't. And unless we're having a housing justice conversation, we don't pull those things into it. We don't pull, to the point Margot made, right? We don't pull the fact that we have let a handful of developers hijack the entire housing industry. And I mean it when I say that. A handful of people have set the supply side criteria, right, around what we are making, how we are making it, why we are making it, and then it sits there vacant as a result. Yeah. We are producing housing that this country doesn't need, right? In lieu of producing the stuff that actually would be helpful. And that conversation, linking that conversation to homelessness, linking that conversation to the fact, right, that people cannot pay their rent, do not have economic security, do not have attachment to the market in a way that will pay for the things that they need, don't have access to food, kids can't go to the right schools. Yeah. That is the justice-based conversation we need to be having.
Yeah. Anybody?
Well, yeah, we're in a country right now where there's 36 units of housing available and affordable for every 100 extremely low-income household. It's like a cruel game of musical chairs. And so by just focusing on the people who've been left behind as we pull the chairs away, as if it isn't the whole ecosystem. And I think, just to raise up what you said, Mark, before, is it's no coincidence in my mind that this is happening to Black and brown people, right? The disinvestment in housing justice, you can't really separate from who got left out of that system, who got left out of those resources.
Yeah. And you gave me kind of a nice segue. I put into the comments section a link for you guys to speak up, contact your legislators. And right now, the Senate went home for the weekend and unemployment's running out. How messed up are we that we don't take care of people during this coronavirus? And the repercussions of all this is, we all say it could, but it is going to significantly increase homelessness. I tell everybody, you've got to educate yourself and those around you about homelessness. You have to be politically active. Locally and nationally, we have to really have our voices, speak up, it matters. And last but far from least is you need to connect to your local homeless services that are working to end homelessness, not maintaining homelessness. They're short on donations, overtaxed, they are doing the best they can, they need help. And so educate yourself, scream real loud at your politicians till we influence positive change, and support your local homeless services.
I mean, like the thing that you just said that I would just like double click is like local. Like my stars, like the local stuff matters.
Yeah.
And like we oftentimes have a hyper focus on the federal government because they have, you know, a ton of money and yada, 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 and we need more money and let's go get this money. But I can't emphasize enough, right? That like cities and states and counties have pretty large budgets and they make decisions about what they spend that money on, right? We have had this conversation in the country around policing, right? And I have been very, very clear that like when you spend half of your city's budget on policing, you don't get to tell me there's no money for housing. You just don't. You've made a choice. It's not that there's no money, you made a choice, right? And you've chosen this carceral response to people in crisis rather than an actual, again, like a response that would dignify that suffering and respond to it with something that they need. And then the other thing that I would say just about the local conditions is so much of how housing is developed is local controlled, right? So we talk about zoning boards, we talk about, you know, housing development, redevelopment authorities. These are mechanisms, right? That like we don't put the pressure on, frankly, that we should. I would love to see like picket lines in front of every zoning board meeting, right? Being like, you need to do better. Like the 5 people who sit on your zoning commission need to do better. And I mean that regardless of where you live. Yeah. And until we start holding the local folks in our own communities accountable, until we start having those transformational conversations at that level, I don't think we'll ever see them in the Senate. And I just, you know, like that to me feels very clear. Yeah. Like how could we possibly get a senator to do something we can't get a town selectman to do?
Yeah. You have to go local because every community is different. You have different resources, different political structure. You have to go local. And one of the things that I've been so impressed, and I'm sure it's happening in other cities across the country, I pay attention to Los Angeles a lot because Los Angeles is in my heart. But the local advocates have been doing things. They have been getting politicians. I mean, yesterday they weren't able to stop sweeps from starting back up again, but they were able to do, because of the CDC guidelines and the coronavirus, they were able to get tents up because the Los Angeles police and the sanitation were ticketing people if their tents were up during the day. Because of, and I thought, I had contacted a couple of advocates and I said, you're asking too much. No way are politicians going to allow you to keep tents up all day. And they did it. And you know what Mark says, it's the battles locally. Federal matters, state matters, but it's local and you all need to get active.
It seems like it has to be a both and though, right? Because I think coming from, there's no question that there's a lot of things that are in local control. And I come from an area where people are pretty active locally. I mean, it's not perfect by any means, but without making those bigger structural changes, you know, without doing the work Peggy's doing on the, you know, on the federal budget, I don't see how we fundamentally get out of this. I agree. I couldn't agree with you more, Mark, about, you know, the monies local governments spend on policing and things, you know, for sure. Like that seems like a no-brainer right there. But still, I guess maybe it's just from where I'm from, where local officials get pounded a lot, and sometimes they do right, sometimes they don't do right. They're, you know, whatever. But sort of the crushing lack of money to build, create, sustain, protect, preserve, promote, you know, deeply affordable housing the lack of, what people get in benefits, all of those things, a lot of those decisions have to lie at the federal level. And I feel like the feds have been kind of left off the hook a little bit on this problem because it is so hyperlocal. So it's not to say that there isn't a lot that can be done locally and that people need to be really active locally, but from an area where people are really active locally, you can see how the lack of an effective federal response has really hurt. And I guess I'm just having trouble seeing how we get out of here without all those levels at every level of government.
Right. I think, yeah. I mean, I agree. I think because that's the thing is it all has to fit together. In communities that are doing better, they always hit a wall because of a lack of resources. And at the federal level, if you think about, with the rental assistance program, right, only 25% of eligible households get it because there's not enough money. And so. And state and locals try to piece together, but all that's done is created more silos because they have to figure out who's deserving once again. So it's only a certain segment of the population, and then all of y'all get surveyed to death and assessed to death in order to see if you're eligible for these scarce resources. And it is this housing the point about making it about housing justice, right? We're never going to be able to build housing for enough housing that's cheap enough for people with the lowest incomes. So there's got to be both the building side and a subsidy piece to understand that people, to help folks have support. We live in a capitalist society, and so there are going to be people who can't afford all the things. So don't we have a duty to help them?
Wow.
And provide some support for them to be able to afford housing, and that's going to have to come with a major shift at the federal level when it comes to resources and understanding that like healthcare is an entitlement and food is an entitlement.
Right.
Housing needs to be.
Yeah. 100%. And I think so for me, right, it's I think that I don't mean to discount, right, the importance of the federal person, right? But I do think that I'm very and you're in San Francisco, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm sort of, because a lot like Mark, right? I spend a lot of time in a lot of weird places, right? Many of them are sort of these mid-sized post-industrial middle of America cities, right? That fundamentally the sort of supply side dynamics and the sort of where what money is kind of conversations are different, and they don't do as much as they could, and they are not having, frankly, the kinds of pressure put on them with regard to pushing the shifts in narrative. Frankly, right, they're just not using resources in a way that is even maximal for where we are, right? And I also I feel like, and Peggy, you would be the person to correct me on this if I'm incorrect, right? But I feel like there has to be, or what I'm looking for anyway, is sort of a groundswell, right? I feel like we can't have transformative politics on the Senate floor until we have transformative politics in our city councils. I just don't know how else it would work, right? And I don't know.
No, my first job was in city government, and so I was in the planning. I worked for the assistant city manager, and we did the planning meetings. And the only time that people showed up was when we were going to annex something new, right? And people out there did not want the city coming in and intruding on their rights. And so I think about this. I remember, I think about park board meetings, and my dream is to do exactly what you said before, of having people actually pay attention to zoning board meetings and show up for them. It would be shocking. Show up for them for our folks, right? They'll show up real quick if it's about the sign at the Waffle House that's going to look bad in their neighborhood, right? We need them to actually show up for affordable housing, but I think
show up in the right direction for affordable housing, because
exactly
the people who show up are the wrong group of people.
Exactly. and I think, and the thing is those meetings are really wonky. I mean, like if are really wonky and really hard to keep a sustained effort in. And so that's another place where resources are needed, right? For community organizers who can help, translate all the mess and the noise to help the public engage in a meaningful way. That is that's another piece of the advocacy puzzle, I think.
Which, Peggy, oh, sorry, Mark.
No, you're fine. You go. No, no, no. This is what happens when we're not governed by 25 minutes and stupid questions.
I think, to Peggy, your point, right? Like that to me brings in another piece of the puzzle, which is we don't fund organizing. We fund things.
Oh my gosh.
We fund almost everything but organizing, right? And and the work that my team does, and the work that true community organizers who are this is where I live, breathe, lay my head, right? Like this is my community, can't get the kind of resources they need to actually develop and execute powerful and transformative on the ground strategies. Yeah. And I have been truly beside myself watching philanthropy in this moment dump millions, if not billions of dollars into various technocratic schemes and campaigns, and but they just won't fund organizing. Yeah. At the end of the day, what convinces somebody to do something? Somebody they know. Someone who knocks on their door, builds a relationship, and says, this is why this is good for you too, and this is why we should care about this together. Yeah. And I just the number of times I get asked for some weird silver bullet, oh, but Mark, can't you figure out a way to, and it's just no, yeah. It actually is just people need to do organizing.
Yeah. Advocacy organizing is the hardest to fund. Robert Edgar used to say that 10% of every grant should go towards advocacy and organizing. If you want to see change. Well, we've gone 45 minutes and not a whole lot of technical problems. I'm impressed.
Mark, you're jinxing us.
No. We're fine.
We had all of ours at the start when we couldn't connect.
Yeah. So with 40, and we started. I mean, we're going to talk about COVID, but it's homelessness might be a little more in the news these days. There's been significant changes of trying to get homeless people in hotels, and the congregate shelters not being safe. But we still have to talk about homelessness. COVID is going to go away at some point, hopefully soon, because I want to start hugging people again. But until that, it's still.
You feel real optimistic today, huh?
Yeah, I am. I am. Okay. Hopefully soon. I am a glass half full.
From your mouth to somebody's ears.
Yeah. And for those of you in the chat, I haven't had time to really pay attention. Derek has texted me a couple of times. If you have any questions, if you have a good question, please share it with Derek, and he will text it on to me, and I can ask the panel. We did get a question earlier, and I thought it was really it's a part of the homeless sector that I think is really there's all these little groups, of homelessness that don't always get attention. And somebody asked, and I don't know if they were asking for themselves, but they said, what do people do in rural communities? Because, I was telling Peggy before, there's a county close by, and it has 0 homeless services. With the coronavirus, there's going to be evictions. They don't have any place to go. Nobody's going to help them. There's no social services. So what do people in rural communities do? And how can we help rural communities, people that end up homeless?
Peggy, do you want to go first? No? Okay. I mean, the first thing that we have to do is show up in rural communities. And I cannot stress enough that like there are some divides in this country that are silly, right? Like, and oftentimes, so one, there is a myth that homelessness doesn't exist in rural communities, and like that's incorrect, right? Two, and again, I think this speaks to like sort of funding and race and racism, but I think that like, you know, fundamentally, right, like the vast majority of the resources that we deploy in this country, this is a little wonky, bear with me, are linked to property taxes. Like that's how local jurisdictions derive most of their revenue. Property tax revenue is deeply racialized, it's linked to redlining, it's all kind of BS, right? And so oftentimes that means that rural communities don't have access to the same kinds of resources other than perhaps at the county level, and then counties are making decisions around like politics and yada, yada, yada. But that would change, right? If we who have power, we who have influence, we like showed up and started prioritizing rural communities in our rhetoric, in our conversations, in our requests, and how we just engaged with the subject matter. And I will say, again, personal frustration, my team has asked repeatedly from some of our foundation partners, right? Like help us, like, because the rural communities don't have big foundations, right? They don't have the resources to bring in the service providers, to bring in the technical assistance, to bring whatever it is they need. And so what we've said a number of times is like, help us, right? Like, because they are asking for help. We would love to provide the help, but like again, the math doesn't work. And so like, how does, like, what's the plan here, right? The second thing that I would just say is like, generally speaking, like transit justice has to be part of a housing justice conversation, because so much of what I hear from people in rural communities is like, everything is 2 hours away from me and I'm stuck, right? And the regional transit that we fund in this country is like literally oftentimes 2 buses that make a loop between major urban areas, don't stop anywhere along the way, right? Like, and do it over the course of half a day. And like, we think that's like that's cool, right? That's what we say. And like, so like, again, I think to Margot's initial point, like to me, getting like rural folks the access that they need is taking that step away from homelessness and towards housing justice and the expansiveness that brings into the conversation.
Anybody else? No?
No, just from a real, thinking about advocacy, this is where state advocacy comes into play, because so much of rural dollars don't go to the community first, they go to the state level first. So there's advocacy that's needed, both COVID dollars, but also general homelessness dollars. They go to the state level. So state level advocacy is really important for rural communities.
A great response. Bill asked a good question. He asked, could we talk a little bit about what does work, what has worked, and what could we do more of? He was really curious about, is there something that's working?
Yeah, I mean, something that's working for homelessness. I mean, I feel like that's a part of the story that's gotten buried. We actually know exactly how to solve this problem, and I say that was noting the irony of someone who runs a research center trying to end it. But like part of our job is to say there's a lot of areas here where we don't need any more research. We know what to do, right? We know that people who have, let's say, complex behavioral needs, we know what works, right? You give them housing and you make services available, and they're optional. You don't have to take them. Works incredibly well. And so I feel like whenever I talk to policymakers and they say, yeah, but what about the folks out there who've got mental health problems, who struggle with substance use problems, so they usually use more vivid language. I say, I'm a physician, none of that scares me, and we know exactly what to do, and we've seen it work really, really, really well. We know that for most people, what they need is a voucher and a house to live in it. Like, to Peggy's point, only 25% of people who qualify for the vouchers get them. And we also need investments into create the housing, right? Because if we suddenly gave everyone a voucher and we didn't actually create the housing, that wouldn't work either. We need to do both. And that would solve most of it. Like, we kind of know what works. And so you see sort of natural experiments, like when the VA, when for veterans, when there was political will to solve this problem using tried and true methods, like different things for different folks, depending on what their needs are, it dropped veteran homelessness dramatically. So there is a lot of good news. The good news gets buried in the fact that at its core, the fundamentals are so rotten that you can't just rescuing people from homelessness and not realizing that the same things that drove those people into homelessness are going to drive the next group in as well.
A lot of the opposition to housing, they'll say, you know, it's an addiction problem or it's mental health problem. And, you know, there is a mental health crisis and there is an addiction crisis. But most people that are addicts are in housing, and most people with mental health issues are in housing. And they all go, well, we need more treatment. We need treatment. We need treatment. And yes, we do need to improve both treatment services for addiction and mental health. But when the person gets out, let's say you're a homeless person and you go into a treatment for 28 days, which is not enough time. It's just not enough time. But that's what is normally paid for. When you get out of treatment, they exit you back to homelessness. And if you're going to the bathroom behind a dumpster in a McDonald's parking lot, you might as well have a beer, right? And I'm not advocating alcoholism. I'm just trying to put some perspective on it. Yes, we need treatment, but if there's no housing after that treatment, it's just this one stupid circle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't, that's my go-to is like, okay, so how long would you not drink if you had to live on the street? And so also then with treatment, how treatment providers who say, oh, you have to be sober 30 days or 60 days before we'll help you. Like, that's the other thing about the turning people away piece. It's like, okay, well, then pretty much the person was sober before they got to you. So I don't understand what you're doing and why. So that's why I think housing has to be so fundamental, right? And getting out of this whole who deserves our help. Yeah. People need a safe place to live. And then let's start from there about what they decide they're going to engage in. But like you said, Mark, most people with addiction disorders have a house. Yeah. And will get their house taken away from them.
I think you wanted to talk. I can see your head shaking. Dr. Kushel, you wanted to say something?
Oh, I was going to say like 100%. First of all, we can't really fix the treatment. Not sure the treatment system could be better. All of that is true. But like, you can't fix it if people don't have houses to go to during, before, after. Mental health, substance use disorders, most folks can be housed. We know that even folks with the most significant ones can be housed. And I feel like this question of who deserves treatment, to me, it's like the tell, right? Like, people are actually telling you that they really don't want to give. It's like a total tell. Who deserves housing? Yeah. Like that's like, right. Just the formulation of the question, and so whatever you say, when they say, well, how about the people with really bad mental health substance use? And I say, like, we can house 95% of them tomorrow. Like, maybe it'll take a few months to get everyone indoors, but we can house them. We know how to do it. We've known how to do it for 20 years. We've got data on top of data on top of data. They just, then they say, well, who deserves it or whatever, that people just don't want to do the work. And there's going to be work, right? We're going to need to move a bunch of resources away where they are. We're going to need to talk about the racial injustice in this country and solve it. Like, we're going to need to do the work, but it's not a question of do we know what to do? We know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think like two points. One is like on the like what works component, like very, very tangibly, right? Like, I think what works is giving people what they ask for. And like, again, it's like people ask me to like formulate some magic bullet here, like, oh, like, but no, like, there's got to be some secret, or, like, Mark, like, come talk to us about what Finland did. Finland built housing and then put people in the houses. Like, I don't know what to tell you here, right? Like, it was not at all like a secret program. Like, they built a bunch of housing, and then when people needed the housing, it was there. No, this is a very A to B solution, right? The other thing that I will say, just like in the vein of like being, transparent and disclosure, like, so I talk about this sometimes, that I have pretty significant mental health problems. I have had 2 full psychotic breakdowns in my life that required me to be hospitalized. I never experienced homelessness because that is not related.
Right.
like it's like I could pay for the things, right?
Yeah.
Or had resource or people around me who were paying for the
Yeah.
things, right? And so as a result, like I went to the hospital, I was there, and then I went back into my home, right? Like
Yeah.
and I can only imagine, right, like how difficult it would have been in those first like fragile couple weeks afterwards, right, where I was like, okay, like new medication, new way of living, try not to do some things, right? If I hadn't been able to like give myself routine and hold
Yeah.
that routine, right? And that again, right? So we're like, oh well, like why is this person off their meds? Where do they keep their meds? Like, don't ask me stupid questions anymore. That's that's the energy I got for the rest of 2020. Don't ask me stupid questions because I got too much to do.
Yeah. I believe that if you look at the foundation of why or what's behind people that are saying, oh, they should have treatment or mental health, is that, and I'm sure there's some that care, but I think the foundation is people just want homeless people gone. And they've been programmed that, treatment is the path. And that is what is needed. We just want them gone. I don't care if it's treatment or whatever. Just get them gone. And the housing thing, whatever reason, there's this roadblock. And I don't get it. I get that it's, we're living this country of individualism and bootstraps and all this other stuff. But to bootstrap, you've got to have boots. And, it's, just... Anyways, we're running down to the end. Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
You just quoted Martin Luther King, a really like a quote that we should, because everybody has a version of King that ain't actually King. Let me be clear on that. And one of his quotes that I love the most, right, is how cruel it is to tell a bootless man to pull himself up by his bootstraps. Like that is the King.
Oh my gosh.
Bring me that energy when you want to talk to me about, well, Dr. King wouldn't like these riots. Dr. King would hate you, sir, for saying that to me. Like, let's be clear about what that is.
Yeah.
So, like, I just want you to know, Mark, that you are a student of Dr. Martin Luther King in this moment.
My gosh. I like Dr. King's version of it better. I think I'm going to have to change the way I say that little phrase. And thank you, Mark. And thank you, everybody. We're winding down to the end. I give you guys a couple of last, if you make it short, couple of last words, and I am deeply grateful. This was a lot more fun than that other thing we did, which was fine. But there's something about a group, and you guys are the expert. I've been nervous about this. I'd never done a 4-camera like this. So I was like, oh my gosh, I agreed to this, and I've never, oh my gosh. And then, like, you guys are really smart. I mean, so anyways, last words. Peggy, you want to go first, because we'll go in the order that you guys introduced yourselves.
Sure. So I think my last words are, I gave a talk at the Housing First conference a few years ago that was about being called to social justice but hating people. And what I was saying about that is, like, I think I'm called to work in this homelessness work because of the ways that we fail people all the time, and wanting to correct for that, right? As individuals, we can be good, but as a collective, we are not doing our job. And so I just want to say to all the folks out there, like, that, to be engaged and to not lose hope, and to those of us who are privileged enough to have a place to live, then we need to be better. We need to be better. And so that's what I would leave us with, is just remember to be the change and be better.
That's a hard act to follow, but I think it's, for me, my last words are I feel like people who wind up being victimized by this society that expects bootless people to lift themselves up by their boots are the same people who often blame themselves for the crisis that others have created for them. And so both to the people who, to really push back and reject this individual explanation for the societal failure. Nothing about homelessness is about individual. This is not because of a series of sort of bad choices or anything. This has been a decision, and homelessness is really the end result of what happens when you have a society that sort of races to the root and that has defunded essential services, and that we need to be having this conversation about housing justice if we actually want to solve homelessness.
Well, now I don't have anything left to say. Everyone took my thing. No, I think, I would say that, like, there's a moment in front of us where we have to choose which country we want. We just have to choose. And we have, I think, an obligation, right, to say that this is an unprecedented time, and so it actually requires unprecedented leadership. We cannot have people in roles, in positions of power, who are saying, let's do what we did before, or we can, or we don't know what the solutions are here. We do know what the solutions are. The solutions are that we stop being this like hyper-capitalist, individualistic nation. The solutions are that we build an economy that is mutualistic and centered on well-being and thriving instead of individual exploitation, right? We could do those things, but it would require us collectively, again, to take that stance. And I want to be really clear here, to take that stance, those of us who are currently housed, those of us who are currently unhoused, right? Like, we need to do that together. Like, I want to be in better partnership with people who currently are unhoused. I want to help build those coalitions. I want to help be in a relationship so that, like, we are collectively, housed and unhoused, picketing the same bunch of words, right? That I think is, for me, what needs to happen next. And, like, reach out to me if you want to do that.
Yeah. I cannot thank you guys enough. Truly amazing. Down in the description is a link to all their Twitter profiles. Go follow them. They encourage me, I learn from them. They slap me around a little bit when I get offline. You got to have friends like that. And I just want to thank them all for joining us. And I will be back. We will be back Sunday night, 8 o'clock, usual time. Sorry I couldn't pay attention to the chat, and I am so grateful to all of you that donated. I just hopefully you will have a great weekend, and I will see everybody Sunday night. Bye.
All right. Thanks, Mark.